Hi! I'm finally doing the book review that I said I was going to do 2 weeks ago. I got really sick, life started happening, and I completely lost my voice, which you can still kind of hear now. So I'm sorry, but let's do this. Just to recap, the books that I mentioned I was going to read in my last video included V for Vendetta, the Alan Moore comic book series, Girl in Dior by Annie Getzinger. And then the other two books I actually had to return to the library already, but it was Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari and Why We Came to the City by Christopher Jamza. So I would like to focus this review on Modern Romance, specifically because one, it intrigued me the most, two, there's just a lot to say about it, and three, it was a really good book, and I feel like a lot of people want to know, like, how it is. In relation to the other books that I did read, I'm going to breeze through those kind of fast. Girl in Dior was really cute. It used really mature language for having a very immature storyline, I would say. So it was a little weird. I feel like if this book were catered to like kids, it would be a hit. But the thing is that the language in the book is a little bit more adult-like. But like I said, there's really not much going with the storyline. If you're just looking for something to read in like 30 minutes as like a pastime, then like sure, check it out. But I personally would not spend money on this book. V for Vendetta. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. I'm actually only halfway done with it. But with only being halfway done with it, it's really freaking great. It's also very contextual, so it's something that you don't want to just breeze through. I still haven't watched the movie because I told you guys I wasn't going to watch the movie until after I finished the graphic novel. So when I finish the other half of V for Vendetta, I will watch the movie and I will tell you guys how I liked it. Why We Came to the City. It was trash. Okay, that's actually like super mean. Without sounding too pretentious about it, and I don't want to sound pretentious about it, but the writing was just like not okay. It just really seems like someone who was like 75 years old was trying to articulate like what a 20-something-year-old sounds like in writing about it and being like, oh, this is why me and my friends, like, why we moved to the city, blah, blah, blah. Just a lot of the descriptive words and things like that were just like super over the top, kind of exaggerated, and it was really a turn off. Like when I was reading, it just seemed like the writer was making things a lot more difficult when in reality, like, he could have simplified stuff. Honestly, I only got a few chapters in. I didn't even finish the book, and I kept telling myself, like, don't judge it too quickly, like, keep reading it. But I honestly could not keep reading it. So I tried, and I'm sorry if this isn't even a helpful review. I just did not enjoy it at all. But moving on, now I'm going to do my favorite part of this video and go ahead and start my review of Modern Romance. To start, I want to say that I definitely took this reading a lot more serious than I do a lot of my other like leisure reads. I took a copious amount of notes on my phone like while I was reading it because I really wanted to make this a good review. What really grabbed my attention right off the bat was the fact that there was a whole introduction about how Aziz reached out to scholars both in the States and also abroad as a means to provide like objective statistics about dating trends and incorporating a lot of like sociological aspects of what's going on. So I really appreciated that. I initially went into this book thinking that it was going to be sort of like a humor, like satire account of what modern dating is like, but I was so pleasantly surprised and also very happy to find out that majority of the book was actually a research study. Just pulling from my notes, he teamed up with social scientists from NYU, MIT, Columbia, Johns Hopkins, and I want to say also Oxford. He also pulled data from online dating sites such as OkCupid, which I thought was really, really cool. I was really surprised that OkCupid even released a lot of their data and things like that to him. I think that was pretty profound. What really fascinated me about the book was that a lot of it had to do with comparative analysis of how dating is today as opposed to how dating has been in the past. He actually, with some scientists, went to a retirement home and asked a lot of retirees how dating was for them back then, what motivated them to date, what motivated them to get married, and things like that. And when you compare the motivations from the 20s and so on to now, it's completely different. The main theme of the book that I gathered was that people in the past had much lower standards than people do now. Yikes. After interviewing a lot of men and women in retirement homes, they actually found that a lot of the times the girls were just wanting to get out of their parents' homes. During the times like in the 20s up to like the 50s and things like that, it was really frowned upon for women to live on their own. And in order for the girls to get some freedom as they started to mature and get older, the only way that they would really be able to get that freedom would be by marrying someone and moving out. Which sounds pretty shitty, but a lot of these women were actually super okay with it, and many of them too, when asked about like, you know, why, like what attracted you to your husband or things like this, a lot of them just mentioned he had a good job, he had a home, he wasn't mean, he wasn't creepy, he was polite. It's always like very, very generic characteristics about these guys that attracted them to marry them. A lot of them were just trying to get out of the house, and yo, I don't blame them. And for a lot of the men, their descriptions about why they were attracted to their wives and things like that, they weren't very complex either. It was honestly more of like I mean, she wanted to marry me, and I'm like, I need a wife, so I mean, we'll get married. And that's kind of how it went. And a lot of them admit that in the dating stages, there was no like, oh, I fell in love with them from like the first time I saw them. A lot of it wasn't actually romantic, more than it was like a survivorship. Like they were trying to survive with each other and live a little bit more easily. It's kind of just like a mutual agreement to be like, hey, I'll make your life a little bit easier if you make my life a little bit more easy. A lot of them, of course, did mention that there was a lot of trials and errors and things like that in their relationship, but in general, they developed a very strong bond with that person because they didn't try to learn everything about that person prior to dating and marrying them. They married them with kind of a general idea of how they were, and then they got married, and then they grew together. So that's kind of cool, you know? So yeah, stark differences in my dog. Oh my god, you're so weird. Stark differences in how we go about the dating process and getting married and things like that. Today it's almost like we do identity checks and like we want their fingerprints and their DNA and their social security, and like we Google the shit out of everyone. We're basically like looking for things to not like about someone to like quickly weed them out and then just look for the next person. What's also changed substantially is the distances we're going to find someone to date or to marry. Back in the day, a lot of people were dating people that lived in the same, like on the same street, on the same block. It was only within a certain radius that these people were dating. So if you grew up in a neighborhood where there was a guy or a girl that was around the same age as you and you guys lived there like your whole lives, chances are is you guys would probably have gotten married. The circumference of how far people were going out to date and marry was substantially smaller, but obviously today with technology, you know, we can date people from virtually anywhere. To provide the reader a little bit of a kind of like imagery in their mind about this phenomena, Aziz compares it to a hallway with doors in it. So back in the day, there was just a hallway with maybe 2 or 3 doors. So there really wasn't much to choose from, and if you don't have much to choose from, you're going to be less picky about who you actually choose. Today, however, it's kind of like an endless hallway with millions and millions and millions of doors. So someone is very much less likely to just pick one door and stick with it, and then, you know, there's something about the person that they're kind of like, like, I don't really like that about them. So they're it's a lot easier for people to close the door and move on to the next one when there's millions and millions of doors that you could choose from. The issue with this, of course, is that people aren't willing to really take a risk on anyone because of the idea that there's millions and millions of options out there. A lot of people are more accepting of just pulling out really quickly. That's not to be taken as a sexual joke. So in the book, they actually propose that this is going to increasingly become more of an issue because we're becoming very, very picky about who we give ourselves to and who we start to date, to the point where a lot of us would just rather be single, or a lot of us are giving up too quickly. The numbers of people who are going to end up being very single for a very long time is increasing substantially. This is where it comes in, where we don't know what the hell we're doing, you know? We're just like, we're lonely, but we don't want someone, but we want someone, but we don't want someone. Like, what the hell do we want? Then the book goes on to talk about online dating, which is like this completely new phenomenon that a lot of people are actually doing, but not necessarily taking serious. And by that, I don't even mean like people are just going on to dating sites to hook up and stuff. It actually goes way beyond that. A lot of people are going on to dating sites, and a lot of them are predominantly based on like aesthetics. So you have to like match with someone if they think you're attractive. If you think you're attractive, like boom, you got a match. Cool. But what's happening is that people are looking at like descriptions, and they're also micro analyzing like text messages and things like that. So it's like, oh my god, he keeps spelling like there wrong. You know, like the different forms of there. So people are like, oh, he's a horrible like person, he's not for me, based off of like a text message, which is kind of silly. I totally can sympathize with people thinking that's annoying, because that's really fucking annoying. But as far as like an actual person goes, I don't know if like a text message is really enough to be like, that person is super unintelligent. Like, that's a little harsh. People organically can, you know, through body language, tone of voice, things like that. That's really how humans receive messages and interpret messages. But when you're solely trying to do all of it through online texting or messaging, so have you, it's really hard to pick up on those very human micro expressions that someone would in real life. So the last part of the book is, it's actually a pretty large chunk of the book too, just kind of goes over how dating is differently like in Tokyo, the States, other places in South America, just to kind of do like a comparative analysis of how different everything really is all over the world. Long story short with that, people in the States just don't know how to initiate anything. No one wants to make the first move, and everyone's living in this really ambiguous like, huh, what are we sort of thing. Yeah, that's the States. In Japan, a lot of people are just completely losing the desire to date and marry, so much to the point where the government is literally providing subsidies and tax breaks and other incentives for people to get married and have children. The Japanese government actually sends gifts to people who get married there now because they're struggling. Basically, the Japanese leaders are like, yo, there are going to be no more Japanese people anymore if you people don't like have babies and shit. So that's Japan. South America is dealing with a really big issue of people playing hard to get as far as the women go. The women say no to people that they like, and they say no to people that they don't like. In return, a lot of the men there are like, oh, no means yes every time, because a lot of the guys are kind of like, they don't know what any of the women want. So they're having a lot of issues with, kind of similar to the States. Sorry, my dog is like cracking me up right now. So similar to the States, a lot of them don't really know what the status of their relationships really are. So in South America, a lot of them are more susceptible to talking to multiple people at one time. So no one really knows like where they stand. It's like, are we dating? Are we not dating? Is this just casual? Is this not casual? Like, ¿qué pasó? Like, no one knows what's going on. You know what I mean? So, yeah. That's basically the gist of Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. I definitely recommend that anyone read this book. Honestly, it opened my eyes to a ton of things that I'd never really considered before. In the back of my mind, I obviously knew that a lot of us are being overly picky for no reason at all. But after reading a lot of the statistics about how dating is today as opposed to how dating was before, I really think as a society we need to kind of revamp how we're going about this, because there's a lot of very sad, lonely people who just want to have a companion, and we're not helping each other. And this isn't to say that we should completely narrow our standards and just be like, hey, you're a dude, I'm a girl. Hey, you're a dude, I'm a dude. I'm a girl, you're a girl. However else you want to go about this, and just like start dating and marrying everyone just for the hell of it. What it's really saying is that, you know, you shouldn't just like totally abandon someone because you like Batman and they like Superman. That's an issue. That's a no-go. No, but for real, we need to start being a little bit more open-minded when it comes to dating, and I don't know, maybe one of us will just get lucky and open one of those millions of doors and just find the one, you know? Until then, from one single person to potentially another single person, goodbye. This concludes my book review.